Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Comics have always been very niche, and while it's been historically rare for them to get respectable mentions in the mainstream, there are pretty famous people who enjoy them, whether they're vocal about it or not. One such individual is comedian and actor Patton Oswalt. I've never been a huge fan of the guy, but it's difficult to deny his success. A thriving career in comedy, notable guest appearances in movies and TV shows, and that's not even including those he's the main character in. And his nerd cred isn't superficial, given that his rant on Parks and Rec was all improvised. Though I wasn't all that impressed. Rambling on about something you're passionate about even though no one else really cares? That's me talking about Cassandra Cain on a slow day. Where's my award? Despite my personal critiques of him, I did buy a one-shot he wrote for DC years ago. I'm taking issue with JLA Welcome to the Working Week, where Patton Oswalt's writing is joined by the art of Patrick Gleason, Christian Alamy, and John Kalish, detailing one average guy's time on the Watchtower. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover is a bit chaotic, like an unintended collage of clipped articles, photo negatives, a cutout of the main character scratching his nose, not picking it, honest, and the centerpiece being the League surprised by someone taking their picture. And his own thumb. Well, most are surprised, Bat's less pleasantly so, of course. But Plastic Man looks too busy going all Shaggy Rogers on a tall sandwich, and Diana doesn't seem bothered, while Jean gives her bunny ears. Plus my first-person account of what happened. Like when I beat Superman at arm wrestling and made out with Wonder Woman. At the same time, 'cause that totally happened. We begin with the nose picker being teleported onto the table of a diner, woozily stating the Dark Knight gave him some gum. He also narrates that he can grab the reader's attention by starting the tale here. Sure got the attention of those guys having lunch, but he figures it's a bucket full of precious and too soon for that. After deciding that starting with a haggard Batman handing him the gum in the first place also doesn't work, for lack of poignancy, he opts to clarify who he is, by starting when Wendy has him tied in her magic lasso, surrounded by the League. My name is Marluce Randone. Both because that's what my parents named me, and also because no one told me I could legally change it to something else. At first I thought Marluce was made up by the writer, but no, it's an actual name of Old Greek origin, but hasn't been all that popular, being seldom used since the 1800s. It could be pronounced Marluce or Marlus. I kind of found two different choices, might end up saying both, but on with the story. He is from Portland, Oregon, an area called St. John's, and self-publishes a superhero-based magazine called Save Us, which he sells for $1 solid. It apparently highlights such things as who Batman's beaten up, what everyday folk would do with Plastic Man's powers, and watching Blue Beetles wait. Hey, if you were going to be off in an upcoming event comic, you'd stress eat too. Nice touch with this post-it note about a future article comparing his personal experience with the magic lasso with others. Shows a degree of seriousness this guy has about his job. He's both fascinated and frightened by the capes, not to mention envious, hoping that one day he's successful enough that he'll have his pick of numerous finger-scorching bookstore babes. Feels like wanting to burn people's digits is a red flag, but if they're attractive enough, who cares, right? Enough with the candor from the kid, huh? Seriously, before we discover he's also a cross-dressing Alan Alda stalker. That wasn't a stalker, that was Jamie Farr. He was in character as Corporal Klinger for a MASH reunion. Though if he was a stalker, wouldn't the superheroes want to know that? Batman wants to ask a few thousand questions while he's under the Lariat's influence, but Superman figures the combination of his interrogation and Amazonian truth rope could prove disturbing for some reason, suggesting Martian Manhunter do it instead, and comes close to calling his pointy-eared friend Bruce, which is weird. You'd think by now he'd be more composed, especially around a civilian. It was last Sunday afternoon when alien pods started raining down on St. John's, and Marluce was having his breakfast of coffee and pizza that he's eating with a knife and fork? You sicken me. He wanted to impress one of the staff, a young woman named Kim, by calling her over and showing him how calm he was, even with the chaos outside. Every time I see her face, Every time I read that panel. Yeah. And apparently, Kim changed both her shirt and her hair color in between panels, because this isn't who he was just looking at. Ah, she's a shapeshifter. No wonder he's attracted to her. She can turn into any superheroine he wants while they're dating. And then he'll be surprised why they break up. His nonchalance quickly evaporates when he sees an alien crawler just outside his window, shrieking matronly just before it crashes through with an eat leap, which fast happened, fear-nailed, and choke-throated, and other hyphenated phrases I've never heard of. I edited the panel out, but yeah, it read real jumbled like. Before the creature could attack him, he and basically the whole town have been transported to the JLA's watchtower, specifically the monitor womb. And Kim has apparently changed her shirt again. Mid-teleportation, that is impressive. Batman assures them all their city is safe, and they should remain calm, reminding Marloose of a crowded, sweltering music festival he went to, with overpriced food, no restrooms, exploitative businessmen, and, well, he apparently likens bats to the guy telling everyone to keep their shirts on. Especially Kim. I don't know why she thinks he needs to change again right now. If you're looking for unexpected commentary on the music industry in a superhero comic, you finally found it. Congratulations. This is where I zoned out. On this shot of Wonder Woman, showcasing both her cleavage and her backside. No surprise there. Seriously though, he and the other townsfolk watch as the heroes deal with the space critters, while Kyle Rayner deals with an oncoming meteor that doesn't seem to be burning off any mass in the mesosphere. After Randone's article, Ted Kord tried the same thing. He couldn't lose the weight either. The guy finally remembers he has a disposable camera, but notices the fastest man alive taking other people's cameras when they started snapping, so keeps it in his pocket without notice. Somehow. As Flash is transported to the town to aid in fighting the creatures, Marloose can barely grasp the shorthand instructions they give each other, refined over numerous drills and maneuvers, some of it because the citizens are around. The not-quite-sentient creatures are all soon dead and piled up, Green Lantern asking if Soups and Jean should fry them. Bat says no, then suddenly and dramatically instructs the Martian to basically fry them. It's mentioned as one of those things only said because of the townspeople, but I'm not sure how that works for secrecy if they can hear Kyle suggest it, get told no, and, well, it's just very odd. Superman's X-ray vision somehow showed teleport vibrational levels, and there's a faint glowing effect around the creatures, so maybe they were about to be teleported away and that's what changed Batman's mind? It's still confusing. With the threat over, everyone is transported back, except Marloose, who sneaked away because the Flash wasn't there for crowd control, avoiding teleportation and even detection by Batman, who used to be his favorite. He goes off to deal with Gotham stuff, including possible Al-Qaeda activity because 2003, just as other leaguers head off for other assignments or personal matters. An asteroid nearly pancakes my city, a swarm of leaping teeth nearly mince me and my friends, and it's all just clogging up the JLA's day runner? They post their schedules on the website. It's not their fault no one bothers to check it for conflicts. Marloose narrates that he used to write for other magazines, but I guess felt stifled and underpaid to write what he didn't want. He also mentions not having any material for his next issue, meaning his 4,000 readers may have to wait a week. If he's selling that many self-published mags, he's making about at least $4,000 a month. Sounds pretty nice, but I bet production costs eat into that plenty. Anyway, he did get some notoriety, apparently ticking off Hawkman, who caught him ogling some lingerie mannequins. Charming guy, this one. He may be a cape gape, but considers himself a serious investigative journalist akin to Lois Lane, rather than a puff piece writer like Clark Kent. And you know who I really hate? Jimmy Olsen. I just thought I'd mention that. With 8 pics left on his camera, a couple pens, half a notebook, and possibly about to get caught by Batman, Randone decides to make the most of whatever time he has, walking around until he stumbles upon Martian Manhunter, in a kind of meditative trance. He considers him Socrates if he played for the Steelers, that he's the hero you appreciate at college after being over Superman, saying the Green Guy saves the world as often as the Man of Steel, but from the shadows. I'm not aware of Jean's larger history, so maybe that's accurate. He snaps a pic and runs off, eventually fully realizing he's on the moon inside a superhero HQ. After some cursing and laughing in place, He retrieves some food, water, and toiletries before finding a place to crash. He wouldn't be caught until after someone sees he's signed into the novelty register book in the level 4 bathroom. Monday, through various monitor feeds, Marlowe sees our heroes in action, from Flash stopping a lion mauling on the way to prevent a missile launch, Lantern calming some alien tempers, then entertaining sick kids, Batman investigating crimes, saving babies, wearing a new suit of armor for whatever reason, and Wonder Woman fighting Bluto? Is Popeye canon in DC? Is he part of the Justice League and no one told me? He manages to sneak in on Bats chatting with the Weather Wizard, though he gets no bubbles. We see him on a monitor, and Pointier's dialogue does indicate he's responding to him, but we don't see what he's replying to. I guess that end of the conversation is only in his cowl. Whatever. Wizard created a device that would send the Virginia shorelines into the ocean, which, even if he succeeds, will have every human and super agency after him for life. And if he happened to kill someone close to, say, the magic users, his afterlife wouldn't be too pleasant either. Instead of that, or more likely defeat by Flash, or Flash Bash, which sounds just wrong coming from Batman, he convinces the Rogue to instead co-patent his invention with a Gotham-based company, to be used in perpetuity for beach reclamation. So instead of a pummeling, he gets a big fat paycheck.
Urge to kill. Fading. Fading.
Marlowe makes a note how good Bats is with negotiations, like a corporate ninja. Kinda wonder how people who complain, Batman only punches poor people, feel about him helping literal supervillains get rich. How'd that work to reform Weather Wizard, by the by? Meanwhile, a character called Leech, decidedly not the kid from Marvel, who was previously reported to have been heading north, looking more menacing and orange, is now in the Arctic, telling Superman that he needed to get away from people, because he's absorbing energy from those around him uncontrollably. Much to Leech's preference, Supes isn't there to fight, but suggests taking him somewhere for some solitude, which probably hints at the fortress. Marluce's notes mentions him as an escaped supervillain, but Big Blue managed to settle things just through talking. More understanding than 1,000 Mr. Rogerses. There's the epic superhero fight we've been missing. Fred Rogers and the last son of Krypton having a pleasant conversation about how each thinks the other guy is really amazing. On Tuesday, he tours the trophy room, Easter eggs aplenty for readers, and muses about the Dark Knight detective. How to do what he does as a normal human, he'd need all kinds of connections and training, all of which the writer would like to think leads back to Lex Luthor. Planting a spy among the supers, who eventually turned on him and quit via blackmail photography. Those photos are of Lex shooting a random citizen in cold blood in broad daylight, for some reason dressed like Little Bo Peep, and that's what's going to cost him more voters than the actual murder. Gotta question Randone's logic, given the visuals show this deal happening and ending during Luthor's presidency, and not when, Batman actually appeared. How'd he get 4,000 readers exactly? Wednesday, he watches Wonder Woman, whom he considered a boring goody-goody, training with 3 supervillains, Cheetah, Killer Croc, whom she previously decided to apprehend, suggesting Batman take a power nap, and Lady Shiva. I thought that S looked an awful lot like a G, but it's her, and she knows why Wendy doesn't let her opponents touch her truth-revealing lasso, though doesn't tell the others. The animal-based foes reveals some of Diana's tells and advise her on better fighting tactics, and this gets them a couple months off their sentences, but Cheetah prefers internet privileges instead. Do not Google fan art of you. For your own good, do not Google fan art of you. I do find it a little odd that these two are giving pointers to an Amazon warrior, but I guess it goes to show Wendy has room for improvement. Though Shiva makes sense in any case. On another 2-page spread, Batman is training himself to withstand the vacuum of space, and yeah, it gets a tad grisly, as he lasts about 24 seconds before Jean closes the airlock. Apparently, the villain Per Degaton busted a watchtower observation window, drawing Bats outside. Had it not been for Lantern and the Martian arriving in time, he'd be dead, so he's pushing his limits for another one of his contingency plans, despite the cellular damage being done to his body. He doesn't have traditional DNA anymore, just tiny bat-shaped strands that spell out, "What's wrong with me?" over and over. Thursday treats us to reports of everyone on Earth having become indestructible, like a boy band that challenged the Doom Patrol for rights to defend the Earth. Kinda late if everyone can bench press tanks, no? Some see this as a possible overdue adjustment to the species, putting them on par with the existing supers. Deaths have sharply declined, new super teams of randos are popping up, and Poison Ivy's apparently been hosting riot parties to distract from her robberies. Marloose watches Plastic Man haul some Trappist monk ale with the help of Ambush Bug and, man, this is a deep cut, the Heckler. He's extra obscure. I might have seen him once or twice before I read this comic, maybe in ads or in the background. To be succinct, he's an acrobatic hero with the power to irritate people with his humor. What? Why is the camera lingering on me? What the fuck?
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message. I love you. Now, back to our show.
Also, he hasn't appeared since 2011, so I guess he was too obscure for DC to give a really dumb and unnecessary reboot. The three are delivering the barrels to Plaza's really big dance party, full of characters familiar and less so, depending on the reader. Animal Man, Adam Strange, the Inferior Five, one of the Guardians of Oa, Spoiler, Superboy, even my favorite Batgirl. This is her only appearance in the book, and she has no dialogue. It's official. Patton Oswalt is better at writing Cassandra Cain than James Tynion IV. Not the highest bar I'll grant, but cleared nonetheless. Though it is odd that with so many civilians in attendance, she's unmasked, but there were times in this era where that was something she'd done for reasons other than heavy melodramatics. Stop me if you've heard this joke before. A priest, a biker, and a businessman walk into a superhero dance party and begin chatting up a blonde woman. I forget how the rest of the joke goes, but the punchline is a koala trying to get boat insurance. They're hanging on her every word, clearly entranced as they repeat what she says, including her desire to break everything in sight.
I'd rather rush in and start breaking things.
As the three are about to do just that, her dress seems to melt and entraps her, as it's really Plastic Man revealing the lady to be Poison Ivy. Okay, so this is a good counter to Marloose's previous pondering if Plaz was only reactive to crime. This party was meant to draw Ivy out, since she'd been using such festivities as part of her thefts. How this happened is the question. He'd walked in on the active party, so at what point did he get to pose as her coat? Did she happen to just be wearing something with the right colors he'd be able to camouflage? Did she come in after he brought in the ale, then posed as clothing that was offered to a woman wearing a leafy one-piece swimsuit? Because that's all she had under there. Was the wig supposed to be the only thing disguising her? Also, a little creepy that when she says he should be locked up in Arkham, he warns that he might poke her with something. Well, she's tied up like that. Hey, Batman, I caught one of your archenemies with a raging kegger, and I sexually harassed her free of charge. Now who's the world's greatest detective? Other leaguers skipped the party, Soups figuring it's being thrown for a good reason, even if it's not his scene. Kyle and Wally joke about him and Bats sharing the traits of not partying and having outer trunks on their suits, which Soups takes with a laugh, having thicker skin than Marloose expected. GL and the Speedster actually remind him of two guys who'd often hang out at his favorite diner, a firefighter and a cop. They joke around loudly, either drinking or sobering up, but when trouble hit, like a burning building, they were instantly all business, determined, capable heroes laughing at death. Until one day the firefighter didn't make it back, leaving his friend to mourn in solitude. Randone later catches some Z's in Aquaman's personal grotto, apparently featured on MTV Cribs, which seems weird. It reminds him of when he was hanging out at a creek in his hometown, and some scuba-suited ne'er-do-wells rowed up to shore with a large capsule containing a mermaid they'd kidnapped. Their crime was short-lived, as Aquaman soon burst out of the water, taking out the two goons, and sicked some crustaceans on the boss before freeing their captive. Arthur still doesn't know why people laugh when he says he gave the ringleader a bad case of crabs. Friday is mostly quiet, aside from Bats arguing with Wonder Woman about her supervillain guests, then getting in Plaza's face about his party, and Flash taking umbrage with the detective poaching Weather Wizard. All this animosity toward Pointy Ears almost makes Marloose like him again. While observing memorials to Barry Allen and Hal Jordan, as well as a fragment of Doomsday's Carapace, because death is Superman, the self-styled journalist wonders how they manage to live each day, not just fighting superheroes, but how the capes keep hold of reality with all the power they wield, and if the people they protect do more than admire them, but genuinely appreciate their efforts. They deserve a 5% discount on their purchases at Dunkin' Donuts, doggone it. Saturday rolls around, and it's the first time on the Watchtower that Marloose gets a full 8 hours sleep, narrating that his dreams caught up with him while they collected 6 days of super shenanigans. He's in a chaotic festival with superhero flair, while his narration gets alliterative, mentioning Blazing Beacon and Super Supplement Human Harvest, while crudely costumed performers rock the stage and Wonder Woman is covered in mud in that pose with the caption, "Humbled Heroes." I'm beginning to think this comic needs either a weekend in Vegas to blow off some steam or a therapist. Probably the therapist. He's woken up by a base-wide alarm, which he realizes hasn't sounded off all week, despite all the villains and disasters. Then looks out the window to see what looks like fire shooting from the earth. I told you that if you picked at it, it would get infected, but does anyone listen to me? No! Flash runs past, apparently not even noticing Marloose, who follows him to the monitor room where the other heroes have gathered. He nervously approaches under the gravity of their shared purpose, dwarfing normal life-or-death decisions, hearing their conversation in fragments as he finally works up the nerve to tug on Superman's cape. And that's when Wonder Woman instantly wrapped him in her lasso. If he'd just spit in the wind, she wouldn't have had a problem. Now, if Marloose had pulled the mask off the old Lone Ranger or messed around with Jim, she'd have taken his head off. This is about where we came in, and kind of breaks its own continuity a little, with Manhunter knelt down to Marloose while beginning his psychic probe as Wendy snarks to Bats, despite Jean having originally been next to Superman. Not a big deal, but I pointed it out because it's my show. Marloose mentions his dream, the festival with a burning mountain, as the kickoff for Flesh Forever. He rambles about everyone wanting to be young and beautiful, a planet of spare parts with fear, fighting, triumph, and tears preceding a grand opening. Some say that new stores are going too far for their publicity these days, but wait until you see their low prices on brand-name goods. Rather jarringly, on the next page, Bats is surprised that everyone has already left to deal with various threats around the globe. "New way for them to stay, the Batman." "Please, the Batman is Reno Romano. Call me Robert Pattinson." This guy, who looks like a model for the latest Kohl's catalog and let it go to his head, explains that the powered heroes were summoned by images intended to draw them to battle, in preparation for the festival. He calls himself Feast, that he doesn't sleep and can't die, which kind of feels like an odd thing to say, but hey, he's here to exposit anyway. Like how those creatures the League fought in Oregon last Sunday were samplers, drones designed to analyze the planet's genetic makeup through a kind of mind filing. Human inhabitants were exactly what they expected and needed, but the superheroes presented a bonus, be it Superman's solar energy absorption, Flash's Speed Force connection, Diana being made of Themysciran clay, even Plastic Man, whom they're still analyzing samples of. They're currently being challenged by a group of conquerors from an eons-old war, who take over planets to fight off boredom, including a collection of biobots whose programming requires new opponents to keep from attacking itself, a tortured warrior fulfilling an old destiny, a sadistic party girl with stolen tech, a speedster so fast it only appears as its own after-image and feeds on the speed of others, a couple aliens that have a thing for terminating the last of any race, and a robot that fights using deadly numbers. The one opponent in all the universe that can only be defeated by those calculus classes in high school you've since completely forgotten. Feast admits he's concerned these fighters may one day turn on him, but they pay him pretty well to arrange these battles for them. As for the humans, who are in agony but not dying because, remember, indestructible, those sampler drones release an RNA mist that enhance their blood cells and regeneration, so that after the heroes are defeated, the populace's undying bodies will be used for spare parts, supplying bone, flesh, muscle, and blood to a spa for interstellar conquerors to be set up on the moon. This huge battle? Advertising, confirming Marloose's statement that Feast was talking as if he was being broadcast. And making some extra cash with video ads randomly starting throughout his speech. The diabolical fiend. I'd use one of those monologuing clips from The Incredibles, but I don't think it works as well when the villain is doing it intentionally. Feast wonders why Batman hasn't warmed up, but Pointy Ears is plenty warmed, as he ejected a pellet from his boot that rolled over and exploded at the space villain's feet. What the heck.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing!
Somehow, Feast's thoughts are downloaded into Marloose, as his narration says the alien was a born spectator wanting one battle, waiting years to take down the legendary bat, while seeking an out to forget all the worlds he had destroyed to placate his entourage, millennia of death that he'd set up. Yeah, this doesn't seem weirdly convenient at all. Meanwhile, the monitors showed heroes dealing with other planet-wide threats, like Firestorm working with Oracle to send a fleet of alien spectators packing, and eventually the League has defeated the opponents they had just met. The immense danger to the world is over in minutes, too quickly to take in. If this were a comic book, it'd have run 20 issues and taken all summer. 20 issues in one summer? Must be including tie-ins, which tracks, but he leaves out the editorially mandated pointless death of a character someone in charge doesn't like, and possibly a writer trying to change the status quo that needs to be undone later because it was a dumb idea to begin with. While the two fighters in the room have gotten their hits in, Bats eventually manages to get his utility belt around Feast, kicks him away, and then detonates it, though the comic skips the explosion entirely, instead going straight to the heroes returning to the base, as Batman uses a ballpoint pen in a manner we don't see.
I thought insurance salesmen were pushy.
It's enough to convince Feast to fork over a fluid that will reverse what the samplers did to the human race, which Flash quickly teleports into the troposphere. The League each takes turns warning Feast not to come to Earth for ill purposes or test the heroes, and Marloose's contribution is saying the villain is lucky that Aquaman isn't present. He'd give you a bad case of crabs. Why is everyone laughing? Later, Randone is concerned that the Conquerors are still out there and may return. Batman tells him that's the price they pay for Earth's primo real estate in the galaxy. If the enemy returns, they'll be ready, because whereas good learns from the best and has a lifetime of tricks to battle the endless variety of evil, there's only one kind of good to fight, making evil weak and narrow-minded. In response, the young man does his best impression of a donkey? What the heck? Not sure I entirely agree with that only one kind of good thing. It seems overly simplistic for something that can be very nuanced. There are a number of actions someone can take that they feel are done for the right reasons, for the greater good, where someone else might look at it and have very different views. This could then lead to a very detailed argument for and against this action, whether or not it is or is not good. It doesn't even get into the theological argument, like those who would say that God is the one good, but atheists such as Mr. Oswalt would likely disagree. I can kind of see what he's going for here, but I don't think it works as well or is as thoughtful as the writer intended. Feast now resides in a stasis cage at Arkham, next to the Joker's cell. Feast never sleeps, but he'll wish he could die. Why? Because he'll get annoyed by constant laughing before the clown eventually escapes? Did you consider that maybe the guy with experience planning big events to draw out heroes and placate warriors might consider striking up a deal with Mr. J, or failing that, any number of loonies that love to see you dead and cause all sorts of havoc even if they fail? World's greatest detective, ladies and gentlemen. And why Arkham? Why not a facility more associated with space-based enemies? Anyway, Bats gives Marloose the gum, we know where he ends up, and later he crashes on his couch, dreaming in half scenes that still somehow make sense. On the watchtower, it's revealed that during his silence bath, probably that meditative state we saw earlier, Jean detected Randone's presence, and detected something strong about him that he's only gotten glimmers of from others. Turns out that police officer in the diner that Marloose knew was the Martian in one of his human disguises, and his firefighter friend that didn't make it out against a blaze that the superhero is powerless against, that was Marloose's dad, and for whatever reason the boy was at the scene of the fire, crying angrily, and from that point on felt distrustful of those who wore badges, capes, and masks, all because of this loss. Jones thinks that it'll be one of the regular people who warn of the world's end, while the supers are focused on the wrong thing, and is glad that it was the young man this time, who's got a good mind to visit. But I wouldn't want to live there. His fixation on lingerie mannequins gets unnerving real quick. The comic ends with Marloose at the diner, looking at various photos, including one of him and his dad, when Kim slips in his bill, which includes a note asking him out, and he smiles. That was JLA Welcome to the Working Week, and while not bad, I don't think it knows what kind of story it wants to be. His suspicious feelings towards cops and supers doesn't seem well supported. Even if you consider his self-described cape gape status to mean that he pays close attention to but doesn't necessarily like heroes, that's not what we see. Not only is his apartment filled with hero merch, he showed plenty of reverence to Aquaman and John, and watched on in awe and smiled when Raynor took out that asteroid. He even mentions Arthur being the second time in his life he saw a superhero in person, though never mentions the first. He could have been talking about his dad, but it's kind of unclear. He had his presumptions, his cynical views, but nothing that really points to him being all that distrustful. We don't know what Hawkman was so mad about, or what his draft on Guy Gardner was like before it got him chewed out by his old boss. He used to like soups, he used to like bats, but nothing about how he thought poorly of them. Only that other heroes being mad at pointy ears made Marluce like him more, for whatever reason. It makes sense a kid that young would feel this way after his loss, take it very personally, but we don't get anything on what animosity remained in the following years. If it wanted to be a story about a cynical everyman seeing that heroes aren't secretly as terrible as he thought they were, it falls pretty short. Without establishing earlier in the book the greater feelings he has about heroes in general or as individuals, it just comes off as guy sneaks around superhero lair, makes snappy remarks to himself.
There it is, Homer. The cleverest thing you'll ever say, and nobody heard it.
Go!
He sees them not always resort to punching enemies, helping the little people, and even showing enough value in their enemies' insights to shave time off their sentences. Which is all pretty good. Not sure how Diana manages that, but whatever. Even Plastic Man gets to shine a little with his plan to nab Ivy. Risque visuals notwithstanding. And how he's not purely reactionary. He sees their human sides, but for all of Randone's narration, little of it pertains to challenging any alleged preconceived notions. As to the overall writing, it's mostly fine, save for some unfamiliar terminology, to the point the narration occasionally feels befuddled, and bits of dialogue that sound slightly amiss from certain characters. At times it can feel like it borders on trying to impress the reader with how smart it wants to be, but it's scarce enough that that may be an exaggeration on my part. I'll admit, when the heroes are each berating Feast, how personal their remarks are, Soups mentioning destroying the planet, Flash about their swiftness to act, Batman about orphaning children, it's mildly corny, but the kind of corny that's obvious but fitting as to not be cringy. It's actually pretty entertaining. There's a casual vibe to how the Leaguers sometimes converse that seems like it's more Oswald throwing in some of his own personality, like Batman saying Joker is all about referencing Cole Porter, though something like that kind of works, since the exchange is about pointy ears needing to keep up with pop culture in order to combat enemies that lean into cryptic clues. It works for his preparation shtick. Preparation shtick sounds like a brand of deodorant, doesn't it? Also, a time or two where it seems certain words were left out, like in Jean's reveal, he says, "In one of my civilian disguises, befriended a firefighter," which should be, "I befriended a firefighter," and a few cases of new bubbles starting with ellipses as if it's continuing dialogue we didn't read. It doesn't read very natural, so I'm not sure if this was intentional or an editing error, though it made sense in cases like Marluce zoning out or being nervous. He also mentions two guys at the diner, referring to them like he didn't know them all that well, but one turned out to be his own dad. Why wouldn't he say that in the first place? I really don't think it would have ruined the surprise at the end. He gets gum to keep his ears from popping when he teleports back to Earth, and he's all woozy, which seems to be a side effect of the teleportation, but no one needed gum or acted all woozy when they were teleported to the Watchtower. It could be because he spent a week in artificial gravity, but they don't explain it that way. Or at all. Randone may consider himself a Lois Lane type of reporter, but we don't get much on his investigative or detective prowess. Sure, the book seeds the eventual scheme early on, with the monitor womb showing various commercials about spas or skincare products, or a newscast about Firestorm showing up at Burning Man, but they seemed more for the reader and are admittedly clever illusions. But outside a dream, which could have just been his imagination being weird, I don't get how Marluce actually figured anything out, much less clued the heroes in on the threat with any advance notice. They were specifically called out, so they would have gone whether Marluce was there or not. Not to mention, they triumphed pretty quickly, and Feast literally exposited his plan to, at least, the viewing aliens outside the Earth, while telling Bats everything he would want to know. Marloose could have muttered something about dreaming he was swimming in Thousand Island dressing while singing Elvis songs as a moose chewed on the moon, and it really wouldn't have changed that much. And that download of Feast's thoughts was an absolute cheat, with no sensible explanation for it. They mentioned that the samplers have some form of psionic hive mind, but it's never explained that it was ever affecting any humans, or that anyone in Feast's crew have psionic abilities whatsoever. Marloose is mostly an observer to his situation and the events he finds himself in, but he doesn't really shape anything. We don't get much on why we should actually like or root for him, even with certain traits of his that people, or even myself, could find relatable, for better or worse. Kinda makes the fact that he gets a date with his crush seem a little out of the blue, too. No indications he published his experiences on the Watchtower, or how people in his life reacted to his week-long absence. Maybe Kim really was impressed with his calmness when it started raining alien fang spiders. It makes much more sense that he evaded detection because Jean actually noticed him and somehow convinced the team to pretend he wasn't around. But before then, Flash didn't seem to notice he was reaching for a camera, and I guess he didn't think to speed frisk other citizens just in case. Quite the oversight, Wally. The art is really good, though it lends itself to cheesecake in moments that feel more questionable a time or two than in others. There was that bit where Kim seemed to change appearance in between panels, and the diner she works at, the Break Fast, while a clever twist on breakfast, is technically misspelled to the proper word a couple of times, like on its menu. And then there was Leech, whose color's practically inverted, but these are pretty minor goofs. And of course the party was a nice Easter egg scene for some obscure characters, even Black Racer if you look close enough through the window, a guy from the 90s that rides through space on skis. If nothing else, it's fun for long-time readers to look through. Overall, this was a really good premise that I felt suffered from not letting us get to know the focal character enough and giving him clearer goals and perspective, beyond wanting to be his own boss and a nerdy ladies' man. That said, for all its flaws, there are a lot of fun moments, and the villainous plot was really creative. It didn't move mountains, but it's not at all a bad read. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.